Okay, in this lesson, we're going to delve into a fun topic. Your emotional triggers, my emotional triggers, the group's emotional triggers, and biases that go along with those triggers, and how they play into dealing with the conflict, moving through the conflict, and ultimately, hopefully, conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm. Triggers, I have a bit of a controversial, if you would, opinion of it, and what I've kind of seen over the years is that when there is a trigger, ultimately, there's two folds to it. Ultimately, when there is a trigger, it's up to ourselves to recognize, whoa, this is something that maybe I've got work I need to do on myself. We can't expect to go through life with the entire world accommodating to something that might trigger you while you stay in that same state in a defensive zone, hoping that you never get triggered or anything. It's just a recognition that this is something that, hey, has upset me, and this is clearly something that I need to work on so I can resolve so it no longer becomes a trigger. It's about evolving, it's about growing as an individual. It's sitting in that uncomfortable space and recognizing that this is a trigger, and if I do enough work, the energy behind it will be diminished to the point where it's no longer going to be a trigger. That being said, just want to add this one last part to it. That being said, it's also a responsibility to also recognize when your partner or when somebody you're talking to has a trigger and not exploiting that for gain in the conflict. So it's a twofold, recognizing your own, that you got to put the work into something, but also not exploiting somebody else's weak spot for your own advantage and your own gain.
Absolutely. And before we delve, deeply into this, I just really want to highlight maybe some of those individuals out there that are watching don't really understand what we mean by trigger. So a trigger point, or an emotional hot button often comes from early on in life. So you go through experiences, you have relationships, you have trauma, and these events or these people cause an uproar or a knee-jerk response, which we would term a trigger. And so it can be such a cascading, list of things. So it can be trauma in terms of abuse from parents or family members when we were young. We can have triggers in terms of past relationships, when they were toxic relationships, when we were improperly treated. We can have triggers that are, just fear-based. I know one of my triggers, I have vertigo, so heights are terrible for me. It's a trigger. And so if I'm dealing with conflict and I have to deal with that conflict on the 10th floor, well, I'm not going to be good at dealing with that conflict at all, because I'm immersed in one of my very traumatic triggers, which is a height trigger, which is linked to fear. And so understanding these triggers and the history, and maybe more of the sort of expanded view of the person that you're dealing with, is so important as well. I know in times when I've been in court situations or dealing with students, oftentimes that immediate conflict that we're dealing with is so interconnected and linked to so many other biases and traumas and emotional disturbances that it really doesn't have all that much to do with what we're talking about in terms of the conflict.
Well, it's the ability to deal with that too. Once you recognize your own triggers, you can acknowledge that, oh, this is my own thing. This person's not responsible for how I'm reacting. I can recognize this. They're not trying to hurt me. This is something that I recognize in myself and is not even associated with that. That's ultimate self-responsibility and self-accountability, when you can realize that, hey, this is something else that's associated with another past event or another situation that I've been through. It's a Pavlovian association, where just like Pavlov's dog, you ring the bell and it salivates. Well, maybe when you hear a loud noise, you remember that your parents used to fight and you hear slamming doors as a kid, and every time you hear a door slam, it kind of shakes your core a little bit. The person's that's slamming the door in your house now may not even be aware of that, maybe not even know that story, but that's just the way they grew up. And you're able to have a conversation like that without unloading on them, saying, why are you always slamming the door? And they're like, oh, I didn't know, I was busy. And next thing you know, you got a huge fight that's blown out, as opposed to, hey, you know what, when I was a kid, this happened, and this is what I associating slamming the doors. This is how I'm feeling right now, and I honestly feel like I'm gonna have a heart attack every time. So, like I said, this isn't about anything that you did. This is just how I'm feeling. This is how I'm responding to it. You want to just keep that in mind next time you slam the door. It's not a big deal, but I want you to understand that this is how I feel when that happens. It's certainly a different energy as opposed to just walking up and screaming at the person who has no knowledge whatsoever of your entire backstory of that association.
Well, I love that you bring this up, and the way that you feel and the way that you articulate, because oftentimes that is the feminine perspective that is so positive in terms of conflict resolution and active listening. When we can become vulnerable, when we can also openly discuss our feelings, we are able to move through things in a different way than we would if we were purely going on logic. And I know myself dealing with so many men in the business world, and it's a great thing, it's a positive thing, and also so many women, because we are in an industry that is the beauty industry and education and medical, so a lot of that female overcharged emotional energy sometimes. But a lot of that, and if we can move into a state where we are authentically opening up and we are allowing ourselves to be vulnerable, again, it's that expanded state, then we're setting that tone in terms of the dialogue within the conflict. When we are resolving that conflict, we're letting that other person know about our needs through that lens of being a little bit more vulnerable, asking for what we need. And this is about courage too, because when it comes to conflict, we have to be courageous enough to ask for what our needs are, understanding that they might not all be met, but being honest and authentic with what it is that we're trying to get from or elicit from or come to a resolution within the conflict.
Setting that state of that energy that you want to have during that conversation as well. If you're looking to approach somebody to have a conversation, you can establish what the setting's going to be. Maybe even saying something along the lines of, hey, you didn't do anything wrong, but I need a few minutes just to chat with you about something that I need to sort out about me. And I'm hoping that maybe I can get 100% of your attention for the next 5 to 10 minutes. So just so you can hear where I'm coming from, so I can kind of talk this out. You're gonna help me grow as an individual. That's pretty disarming. That gives the person the chance that, hey, I'm not gonna be attacked, but I get to help you with something. I get to feel important in this relationship. I get to feel important in the situation as a confidant. You can talk about just about anything with the person if you establish that, hey, you're not under attack. I need to sort out something about me. I'm hoping you can help me. And you can establish a backstory, establish what the current situation is, and then look for resolution in an act by creating a situation of active participation.
Absolutely. And I think every human being intrinsically, we have this inner desire to help. And when you position any dialogue in that way, where, hey, you know what, I need a little bit of help with something. Can you take a few minutes for me? You're asking politely, you're sitting down, you're hopefully creating that safe space. And if that individual honestly doesn't have the time, don't push it. That's the other thing in terms of the conflict, or when we're going through these dialogues in our interpersonal relationships. You also have to, when you're coming forth with something, be willing to be patient. Be willing to wait for that right time to come about. I don't know how many times in my interpersonal relationships where people that have or are disgruntled have forced me into a dialogue. I want to deal with this now. Well, you know what? I don't have my mental capacities with me right now. I have so much stress. I'm not ready to enter into this dialogue at this moment, and then it will lead to a flare-up. Okay, so also it is our responsibility that if we have something that we want to discuss, that we can't really expect, immediate results. We have to be patient. We have to be willing to work through the process.
It really does come from a position of fear. When somebody wants to resolve something now, they want to talk about something now, I want to resolve this now, is because there's a heightened level of fear that sits behind it. That person's afraid of loss, getting in trouble, whatever the reason is, or even adrenaline that you're holding on to, because adrenaline and fear come from the same hormones.
Yes.
If a person's coming out of a position of fear, they need to resolve something now, but you need some time, there could even be an opportunity saying, hey, you know what, everything's going to be just fine. I can't wait to talk to you. Let me clear up these 3 or 4 things, and then I want to talk to you as soon as I possibly can, because you're important and I want to hear exactly what's going on, but I also want to give you the respect and 100% attention that right now I just don't have. How important is this really? Is somebody going to die if we don't talk right now? Establish how important this is. And maybe, you know, that calms things down a little bit, provides a bit of context of what both of you are dealing with at the same time. If somebody wants to deal with something immediately, maybe they just need some reassurance that everything's going to be okay, and you're able to buy that time and get that patience. But you're 100% right. It's establishing patience and realizing, hey, as much as we'd like to have all stresses in our lives removed instantaneously, it's
a tall order.
Yeah, it's a bit of a problem. We have instant gratification, instant satisfaction. We have that everywhere with our microwaves, our TV, our entertainment. Everything around us is instant. But the things that take a little longer to build are the ones that last a hell of a lot longer than things that just stick on and glue instantly.
I love it. And I know even from a leadership perspective, because, you know, both of us are in leadership roles within our companies, and we both have to mentor and then also deal with a lot of conflict, customer service. And one of the most wonderful things that I've started to integrate into my leadership style and integrate into my conflict management style is that patience and not reacting in a knee-jerk fashion. I think some of the biggest mistakes I've made in my historical conflict resolution or non-resolution is reacting immediately. When there's heightened emotions, when we're in a crisis point, making any huge decisions or flash decisions, they're never properly thought out. So it's not that you want to shy away from conflict and bury your head in the sand. No, you have to deal with it, but you don't have to deal with everything that moment. And that's really what I've learned as a leader, that I need to take a step back. I need to take the time to gather my information. Information gathering is so important. I need to talk to all of the parties involved. I really need to get a temperature read on all of the stories. I mean, oftentimes too, when it's the heat of the moment, the actual description of the events isn't always as accurate as when all of the individuals have calmed down, taken a step back. So that's something as well in terms of triggers and my own personal triggers. Pulling the trigger too fast can also be an impediment to conflict resolution.
Well, even pushing for a decision. You look at Warren Buffett and a lot of the high-ranking CEOs and financial moguls in the world. They acknowledge that their entire their entire job is just making decisions. Buffett himself said he's lucky to make 2 or 3 important decisions a year. That's it. You know, you can take your time to make a decision. And generally speaking, if you're pushing someone into making a decision, what you're trying to do is bully them to make a decision that's going to favor you. Mm-hmm. So it's given that patience and taking that time for all the information to come up. So if you're looking just to achieve bullying somebody into to what it is that you want, then force that decision right off the hop. But if you're actually caring about that person, caring about yourself, and caring about the relationship, and caring about what that could evolve into, the closest that everybody's claiming that they want, well, that requires restraint. That requires pulling back and allowing for decisions to happen organically and naturally, and allowing both parties to have their input before they come to an agreement or resolving a conflict. Resolving a conflict doesn't mean forcing somebody into seeing your opinion, and that's the only way of doing it. That's a great way of turning down the temperature just long enough for a flare-up to come at the next conflict, which is even worse than this one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as I had stated in earlier videos, you know, conflict isn't always negative. It can be a catalyst for so many beautiful opportunities to heal your own self. You know, as we go through these conflicts, they're actually little landmarks of self-growth and expansion. So conflict is something that's part of our daily life. That's why, you know, we're delving into this really exciting topic. We are going to be unraveling it even more in the next segment, so stay tuned and click on for the next segment of conflict resolution.